Yes. Okay. So it is a privilege to have here today with us Professor Abdurishid Yakup from the Berlin-Brandenburg Academy of Sciences and Humanities. He's one of the major names, one of the big names in Turfan studies and just general the study of Old Uyghur and Turkic languages. He received his PhD from the Central University of Nationalities, and then he did his PhD at Kyoto University with Professor Shogaito. And currently he's working at the Berlin-Brandenburg Academy of Sciences and Humanities on the Turfan, the Old Uyghur Turfan text. And he's also been, for the past 3 years, the Changjiang Scholar Distinguished Professor at Minzu University of China in Beijing. And today he's going to talk about how the Uyghurs, the old, so in the pre-modern period, how the Uyghurs used Chinese language or how they interacted with Chinese language. So please welcome Professor Abdurishid Yakup.
I'm a little bit nervous. I'm feeling I'm at Cambridge now, although I'm at home as every day. I'm very delighted to be at the Dunhuang and Silk Road Seminar of University of Cambridge, and I deeply appreciate the kindness of Professor Imre Galambos for giving me this very honorable opportunity. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation in PDF before I start my talk. I share it with you. Yes. It's a very well-known fact that all Uyghurs had extensive linguistic contact with Chinese. Lexemes copied from Chinese existed before the establishment of the Uyghur literary language. According to the Russian linguist Anna Dubois, at least 19 lexemes might have been copied from Chinese into Turkic, which she calls Proto-Turkic. Majority of these lexemes should have been first transmitted to the Old Turkic literary language and were then to Old Uyghur. Following the introduction of Buddhism, the Chinese influence in the Old Uyghur language largely increased. Large number of lexemes were copied into the Uyghur literary language, and they cover rather broad semantic fields, including religious terms, religious terms, mostly Buddhist, astrological notions, religious and administrative titles, civil and administrative vocabulary, lexemes dealing with plants and minerals, lexemes dealing with daily life, societies, spiritual life, as well as a certain number of lexemes dealing with human characteristics and abstractions, demonstrating long and intensive linguistic contact between Chinese and Old Uyghur. Actually, I prepared a very good table of semantic fields. Apparently, it's not coming. Chinese influence on Old Uyghur is not merely restricted in the lexical copies. Chinese imitating sentences are numerous in Buddhist texts. And in certain type of texts, in the first instance, in the Agama and Abhidharma texts, they are dominant. In the Old Uyghur translation of the Eketara Agama, we find the following clause. Bab chop anung et özün. If you see, first you will see some Chinese characters, shu, fu, qi, shen. Then it was translated into Uyghur as bab chop anung et özün. I glossed it below so you can see what does it mean actually. And this sentence, actually, if you see that follows the Chinese word order. For example, shu was translated as bab, and chop translates as fu, and aneng translates chi, and etüzen translates shen. It's exactly in the same order as in Chinese. And the command word order in Old Uyghur, this sentence should be as follows. Below aneng, etüzen, then first comes aneng, and then the last word, and then the first word, and then the second word. So in normal Uyghur, I would say it would be in very different word order, but in this translation of agama, we find it really in the same order as in Chinese. Even the order of converb, auxiliary verb construction, coding ability may follow the order of the corresponding Chinese construction. Below, I show again an example from the same agama text because it was edited by me. It's easier to use. For example, De Sheng was translated as Boldular Utkale. This is De Sheng and Boldular Utkale was taken from the Chinese Old Uyghur translation of agama. The Celestials were able to win, and Boldular comes first, and bol is the auxiliary verb, coding ability, and the main verb ut, to win, with converb ghale comes a second. Actually, it must be ut ghale boldular. The ut ghale must come first, and boldular should come after that. In this sentence, actually, if you see that it follows exactly the same Chinese word order again. De is the corresponding word in Uyghur, bolde, and the second one, utkale, is exactly sheng. That means it followed again the Chinese word order. Surely this is not a phenomenon specific to the Agama and Abhidharma texts. The same or similar type of sentences are also observed in other texts. In the following sentence taken from the Old Uyghur version of the Chinese primary Chenzivin, the 1,000 characters essay, the verbal predicate occupies the first position as in Chinese, and each case, I show the example again. We have such a sentence in the Old Uyghur translation of the Chenzivin, Berti, Orunun, Takı. Perhaps it doesn't exist. The manuscript is corrupt, so we only can see T. We suppose it might be a Taki again. And Utunti, yield, Elin, country. That means he conferred his rank and yielded his country. And this translates Tui Rangguo in the Chenzivin. If you look at that, and Berti actually stands for Tui, and Orun stands for Wei, and Utundi translates Rang, and Elin translates Guo. In this case, not only in Buddhist texts, also in the translation of the Chenzivin, you will find exactly the same phenomenon that the Uyghur exactly follows the word order of Chinese. Such sentences imitating Chinese structure is frequent in late Old Uyghur texts. Professor Shogaito has extensive study of such sentences in his several publications. In the first instance, and the following following 3 publications, I show them here. For example, philology and linguistics, Ondoku and Kondoku in Old Uyghur. It was previously published in Japanese, and last year we translated the whole text into English. Now it's available in full English version online in G Stage in a new volume of Gengo Kenkyu, Journal of Linguistic Studies. And the second one is Uyghur Abhidharma Texts, a philological study. This is a Japanese book. It has a very long introductory part, about 200 pages, and it deals also with the Chinese imitating sentences. And the last one is a short one. If you do not have time, you can look at it. It was published in the volume of the wonderful conference, Turfan Revisited, edited by my colleagues Desmond Durkemaisa Ernst, Simone Rashman, Jens Wilkins, Mariana Yaldis, and Peter Zimmer, and so on. These are very important publications by him. You can, if you are interested, you can find very detailed study of this phenomenon. Most remarkably, the old Uyghurs developed own way of pronouncing Chinese characters. It was the Japanese linguist Takada Tokyo who discovered the existence of the Uyghur pronunciation of Chinese characters in 1985. He makes an influential statement in his paper on the old Uyghur pronunciation. He writes, Uyghurs once had a system for pronouncing Chinese characters as those extant in Japan, Korea, and Vietnam as a result of the continuing influence of the Chinese language through the Buddhist texts. His statement is mainly deduced at that time from the phonological characteristics of the sound notes of Chinese characters, written in two fragments preserved in Istanbul and Berlin. However, it was the late Japanese philologist and linguist Masahiro Shogaito who clarified the existence of the inherited Uyghur pronunciation of Chinese characters and its characteristic features, which is now known by its abbreviation in IUPC. Professor Shogaito's research started with analysis of the Chinese copies in the old Uyghur translation of the Shenzhen biography and made significant progress through analysis through his analysis of the 15 Chinese fragments written in Sogdo Uyghur script preserved at St. Petersburg. Now the IUPC is rather systematically described through the analysis of the Chinese booklet U5335 written in Sogdo Uyghur script. I show that here. This is the one page, part of the page of that Uyghur book. Actually, it's in Chinese, and this is the publication based on research of this small booklet. It's very important. So the result is published, so I do not want to go into very detail. According to Professor Takada, a Chinese conversational dialect that had long been used in daily life in the Turkmen region must have been the basis of the old Uyghur pronunciation of Chinese characters. However, the IUPC itself has several layers. Professor Shogaito identifies protoforms, matured forms, and non-matured forms within the IUPC, which represent different layers of the IUPC. I show one slide again. It's actually done by Professor Shogaito and was used in his talk given in 2012 in Beijing when I invited him to visit Beijing in 2012. And as you see, and all this IUPC has such layers. Sometimes some scholars say, I found here one, and it might be a new copy from Chinese in the Yuan time. That's wrong. It's an inherited Chinese pronunciation. It might be borrowed into Old Uyghur before the nasal was lost. So it might be an old copy or old borrowing. So we must closer look at different layers of the IUPC. existence of IUPC has very great significance. Professor Yoshida Yutaka writes, Uyghurs had their own way of pronouncing every Chinese character. Thus, the Chinese elements in Uyghur cannot simply be regarded as loan words because every Chinese character can be potentially employed by them. That means they had that system, and just like in Japanese, they can use it from the Tang period until the Mongol period. So, and they have its pronunciation, and they keep it. So it should not be necessarily be what you say, a new borrowing or something like that. And in this talk, however, I only briefly address two aspects of Old Uyghurs' use of Chinese. The first one is Old Uyghurs' use of Chinese as part of Old Uyghur texts, and the second is Old Uyghurs' use of the Chinese language. Let's start with the first one. Use of Chinese and Chinese characters in Old Uyghur texts is a very common phenomenon. Chinese and Chinese characters are not only used in Buddhist sutras, Buddhist commentaries, Buddhist stories, and Buddhist alliterative verses, but also in secular documents and medical texts. The earliest use of Chinese and Chinese characters is observed in an Old Uyghur secular document written in the West Uyghur Kingdom on the backside of the Chinese Buddhist text, Tajir Dulun Mahaprajna Paramitod Padesha, translated by Kumarajava. You see the text here. On the left side, you see the Chinese text, and Uyghur text is written on its backside. Judging from its finding place sigla, the text should have been brought by the third German Turfan expedition and is currently preserved at the Berlin Turfan collection. It is edited by professors Takao Moriyasu and Peter Zima in 1998. The text comprises 13 lines. According to the editors of the text, it might be the final part or the end of the first section of a list of fields belonging to an unknown temple in the Turfan area. It starts with a Chinese phrase that mentions a field belonging to a temple, followed by its Old Uyghur translation. It continues with a Chinese phrase that mentions a canal, followed by its Old Uyghur translation. Below, I only mention the Chinese phrase in the third line, which is rather complete, and its translation. Here you see 北宜都区距别司纽司称 there is a break, and then 中 then 元 for nu 等天. If you translate it into Chinese, it would be in the north, it goes to the fields of Cheng and something Zhong, and Yuan for, etc., of the temples Biesi and Niusi at Tuqu. Then its Uyghur translation, we see its Uyghur translation is like that in the text. Tağdıningak Tuqudaki Persi Tusi İki Virhar Chi. Then we have a space there, and the text is broken. Vardu olarının yerinin simi adrar. And the Uyghur text can be translated as in the north, the two temples, Persi and Tusi at Tuku, is separated by the boundary of the fields of Cheng and Un, Vardu. My interpretation and translation is a little different from the edited one. I believe in this text, to all Chinese characters, I mean, these characters, I have given them here, 北 Feiyi, Tuju, and some and etc. Were read in IUPC because several words in the Chinese text occur in the IUPC in the old Uyghur translation. You see here we have Tuku, and it's exactly Tuqu in Chinese. Then we have Persi, that's Biesi in the Chinese text, and we have Tusi, it's exactly Nusi. Yeah, here you see denasalization, and then we have Fonu, and that's Pardu. Here again, the denasalization. That means I believe the editors of the text also believe that, and all Chinese characters were read in IUPC. The situation is different in the other Chinese old Uyghur bilingual document from the same period and edited again by the professors Moriyasu and Sima in the same paper. In these fragments, the Chinese and Old Uyghur sentence occur in separate lines, Chinese first and then the Old Uyghur. Interestingly, as the editors mentioned, the Old Uyghur text also starts from the right side, just like the preceding Chinese line, not from the left side, as should be in Uyghur usually. This is the text. It's really different, and first comes the Chinese and then follows one line Old Uyghur, then Chinese, then Old Uyghur, Chinese, and Old Uyghur. And actually the Old Uyghur one exactly translates the Chinese text. You know, the order is from right. Most interesting thing is here, the order is from right to the left. A small woodblock print fragment discovered in the Bezekli caves between 1981 and 1982 by the Chinese archaeologists presents another Chinese Old Uyghur bilingual text. The text is currently preserved in the Turfan Museum by the shelf number 80 TBE 763. This is the fragment. It also has interlinear Chinese characters between the Old Uyghur lines, which represent word-for-word counterparts of the words in the Old Uyghur text. Only to line 5, there are no corresponding Chinese characters. Presumably, the Chinese characters in this line are simply damaged or not visible. Thus far, Chinese characters found in Old Uyghur prints were mainly identified as part of paginations, sheet numbers, and textiles. In that case, this is a very special fragment. As far as I know, we only have this fragment amongst the Old Uyghur woodblock prints with such Chinese gloss. On the other hand, we only see like this. We have Chinese as part of the pagination. We have Chinese as sheet number. You can see perhaps here. And then we have, this is also a very rare case. It's a fragment from Dunhuang and was published in Peng Jianzhang's excellent volume. You see below here as part of the text some Chinese characters. This is also a very rare case, but this one is really the only fragment what we can call it bilingual. The Bezeklik fragment is really different. It's the first known bilingual fragment in which the Chinese characters represent exact parallels to the Old Uyghur words. Furthermore, the space between the lines is relatively big. You can see it here. And this gives the impression that the text might be printed with movable letters. And in contrast to the Old Uyghur text, which is written in the so-called square type of Old Uyghur script in bold letters typical to the Old Uyghur prints, the Chinese characters are in standard type and in relatively small size. Judging from the calligraphy, obviously they were written by a skillful hand. In contrast to the bilingual document from the West Uyghur Kingdom, the Chinese text, I mean this one, starts from the left side, followed by its Old Uyghur translation in the following Old Uyghur translation. That means this is the opposite. Old Uyghur text starts from this left side, and the Chinese text follows its order. It also starts from the left side this time, not from the right side. This fragment was edited and investigated in my publications, published in the first Schrift to Professor Röhrborn in 2019. I will refrain from discussing its content here in detail. However, frequent use of Chinese characters is one of the important features of late Old Uyghur texts produced between the 13th and 14th centuries. And for the Abhidharma and Agama texts, it's essential. Below, I show the first folio of the Old Uyghur Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya, preserved at the Museum of Ethnography in Stockholm. This is a beautiful fragment. The first Chinese line is the title of the text, and then comes the book number here. Then, very interestingly, in the first line, you will see also Zhen as pagination. And obviously, it comes from Chenziwen. Yes, in Chenziwen, we have Shen Pi Shou Zhen, Zhi Man Zhu Wu. It comes from this one, this Zhen. This means the order of chapters in this manuscript is numbered according to the chapter or character order of the Chenziwen. In chapter 14, we find Zhi. According to Professor Shogaito, who edited this text, such a numeration should have been based on the catalog of the Khitan Tripitaka, reconstructed in the Busho Kaisetsu Daijiten. That's the explanatory dictionary of Buddhist books, in which Zhen and Zhi exactly correspond to the 7th and 14th volumes. Judging from the shape of the Chinese characters for nirvana found in the colophon of the text, Professor Shogaito argues that the text in the Khitan Tripitaka should have been served as basis of the Old Uyghur translation. You see here the word for nirvana is different in the Khitan Tripitaka, the second character, from the usual writing in the Taisho Tripitaka. This was the point why he argues that it comes from it. The text was based on the Chinese text in the Khitan Tripitaka. Actually, this point was pointed out in a publication of Professor Chikusa in 2003, and later also discussed by Koichi Kitsudo. This paper you will find in this volume edited exactly by Professor Galombosch in 2013. So we have also an English publication and a discussion in English of the phenomenon. All the Chinese characters in this folio are taken from the Chinese original of the Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya. If you see, we should go back here. Besides, until here in the first, second, and third line, all 3 lines are taken from the Chinese originals, but only 2 characters I marked in yellow, wen and da. They do not occur in the Chinese version, at least in the Taishu version of the text. But very interestingly, Professor Shogaito and Koichi Kitsudo found these characters in red ink in a Chinese fragment currently kept in the Berlin-Brandenburg collection. You will see here, I think, da, and here you see a red in red ink when. This fragment was also published, an excellent photo in the paper by Koichi Kitsudo in Professor Galambo's volume. If you see the text here, all translations besides da, Song Yue, Shuo You, Si Zhongyuan, these things first occurs in this text and in Chinese, and then they were translated into Uyghur. Let's see its translation here. I took it here separately, and here Shuo comes first, and then Yu and Si and Zhong and Yuan, and they were exactly translated in the Chinese word order, you know, Yarlakamish and Dain, and yeah, corresponds to Chinese Shuo, and all is copula, and then bar, for bar we have Yo, bar translates Shuo. I'm sorry, it's a little bit not in exact order. And here Si was translated by means of for, and Turluk is exactly the translation of Zhong, and Basuchi is Yuan, and so on. This is the way the Chinese sentences translated were translated in this text. The Old Uyghur translation of the Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya has further peculiarities in use of Chinese characters. For example, in this text you find many places Jing, and it stands for Jing Liang Bu. That means the opinions of Vaibhashika, and you will find Po in many places. It's an abbreviation of Bi Bo Sha Shi, the masters of Sautrang Tika. This is also peculiar to the Old Uyghur translation of the Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya. Use of Chinese characters in the Agama texts is much more complicated than those in the Abhidharma texts. However, use of Chinese characters in the Old Uyghur Agama texts also follows certain rules. Below, I would like to outline some rules I observed in the investigation of a Stockholm fragment of the Ekotara Agama, which was edited by me and included in the volume dedicated to the edition of the Old Uyghur Agama fragments preserved in the Svinheden collection, Stockholm. I show it here. Yes. Firstly, predicate verbs or predicate phrases of clauses were provided first in Chinese and then in their Old Uyghur translations. And this text you will see at Gülük asırlık bulmak erse, then comes Sheng, then is translated into Old Uyghur Togup, then comes Çungşı, bir işlik bulup bulmak erur, and so on. And if you see the original, they were taken from the sentence 德山出德山立者圣征见家玉山指师宋氏. If you look at the Chinese sentence, clauses, you will immediately find that sheng is exactly the verbal predicate in the first clause, and congshi is the verbal predicate of the second clause. So they did not take the characters without any reason. They were exactly the predicate verbs, and we will see below also some of them are predicate phrases. For example, here we have this text in the Uyghur text in the translation. 次应作使, then follows kazik tagdi chaishi qilg'uluq. This is the exact translation of the preceding Chinese clause. And if we see the original, and we will see 而是罗月城中驻藩之等次应作使. Here 次应作使 actually is really a predicate phrase. And here, the translator or the compiler of the text only has taken this predicate and then translated it in Old Uyghur. This is the predicate phrase. The elements previously considered as proper nouns are actually parts of predicate phrases of existential clauses and represent new information in the clause, namely the focus. I will show one example here. We have the three characters here, and then kukuta shirshi tap. Kukuta shirshi is exactly the translation of the preceding Chinese. And if you see the original, previously we said, it was taken because it was a proper noun. Now I believe that it was taken not because it is a proper noun, because it's a part of the predicate, and exactly in this existential sentence, it's the new information which nobody actually cannot be concluded from the preceding part of the text. That's why this part was taken. If the clause is negated, then the negative element is taken, given in Chinese characters, and then the Old Uyghur translation of the entire clause follows. For example, it's unfortunately in a small characters. The fei we see here, at uzi yini bulur ermez Tanrı yerinde. Then if we look at the Chinese text, we find that 非有天而得也. The 非 actually negates the entire clause. So it's very important. It's just like here the predicate core in this sentence. That's why only here 非 was selected and given in Chinese character, then was translated into Old Uyghur, I mean the entire clause. I may say quite confidently that the majority of Chinese characters in the Old Uyghur Agama texts are predicate verbs or predicate phrases. That is the focus, which usually represent new information. In coordinative clauses, the first clause occurs in Chinese characters, followed by the Old Uyghur translation of each coordinative clause. Here I have one example here. 次是其, then follows its Old Uyghur translation. Is this suitable for them? That's the translation of the Chinese, and also the following the Old Uyghur text. And it is taken actually from Yunhe Shizun, 次是其未废其. That means here we have two coordinative clauses, 自是其, then the second one is 未废其. Here, in this case, they only have taken the first coordinative clause and the second one ignored simply and translated both into Old Uyghur. As we see in this sentence, actually the coordinative clauses are complements of a complement clause with speaking verb predicate in the Chinese text. Here I do not want to talk about it too much. If you see that the entire coordinative clauses, two clauses, are actually the complements of the preceding clause. Yun 和时孙. Yun is a speaking verb. In copular sentences, only some complements which were considered as representative or unintelligible occur in Chinese characters, followed by their Old Uyghur counterparts, but others are ignored. I show one example here. We have such a sentence in the Agama text, Manao, Ashwa Parp, and Cheshi, and then Yu Mushi Ragawu Yimater. Here, Manao is coral, and the other one, Shishir, is agate. Then again is an addition. I come back to it later. If you see the sentence, So Wei Qi Bao Zhe, then we have the names of the 7 jewels. And the author, this is a, Qi Bao Zhe. This is a copular sentence, I think. And then the author or the compiler only has taken Manao and Church. He simply ignored others. Perhaps that's my guess. These 2 words are a little bit unintelligible for normal people because he, my evidence is that he explains the last word again. If it's intelligible for everybody, he doesn't need it. Didn't need it. So he just has taken such parts, and others he simply ignored. Previously, we thought that they have taken some very special words. I think they were taken as representative of complements of copular clauses in the copular sentence. I'm sorry. The alternative translations, as we see here, is presented with you. Here we see such a sentence. It was translated into Old Uyghur as Kenti özümüz uktalım azgıya köngülümüzni. Then comes you. Then explains inişlenmiş imetir. That means the part of the you actually explains the preceding part of the sentence. In the translation, you can see it somewhat clearer. Let's explain our very little mind by ourselves. Again, it's also said it was brought in peace. Brought in peace. That means this might have been read in Old Uyghur, Yimme, or just in IUPC pronunciation. It's not clear. Anyway, the alternative explanations follow usually after the character you. And in Gathas, in the Gathas, the first stanza of Gathas is provided in Chinese characters, and then the Old Uyghur translation of the entire Gatha. We have one example here. Here we have a sentence, Ren Wei Tian Shan Chu. Then its translation, I marked it in green, and others, other part of the Old Uyghur text is the translation of the following part of the Gatha. That's the Liang Yu and so on. And here, the author or compiler only takes the characters of the first Gatha, then simply omits the others. This is, I think, this is also true of another Gatha in this text. And I looked at all places where we can find Gathas, and this my observation proved true. There are these are parts of rules I have concluded from the Stockholm fragment of the Ekatara Agama. I assume these also apply to other Agama texts. I would like to extend my research to other parts, other texts. I mean the other Agama texts. I strongly believe I will be able to find general rules of Chinese use in all Uyghur Agama texts. Previously, I was really confused, as many colleagues. I thought it's difficult, and why such stupid characters were taken here, and why not others? And now I think I am following the right track, and I found the right track, and I believe I can find further rules. Here I would like to briefly address a very old question on the old Uyghur Agama texts of this type. Always it was asked for which purpose these old Uyghur Agama texts might have been used. This was a question we heard many times since we saw such texts. Based on my understanding of the Chinese characters in old Uyghur Agama texts, I tend to consider the old Uyghur Agama texts in the form we see now are readings prepared for teaching purpose. The Buddhist monk who compiled these readings just wanted to provide a useful teaching material for monks to explain important information conveyed in every sentence and gatha found in the Agama texts. That's why he has chosen mostly the predicate verbs and predicate phrases, because they really code new information and most important information, and they represent a focus in the sentence. In a colophon written on the empty space before the chapter title of the block printed Chinese Ekatara Agama we read, it was actually published. You can recognize it immediately. This is Chinese block printed text of the Ekatara Agama, and here in the blank space you will find a 3 lines colophon in Old Uyghur. It was published by Professor Gaban in 1967. The text runs like that. Yet üstünki lison bakşımnın kutunda buyanında bo şingir hamni. Shingir ham is Sangir hamni. I'm sorry. That's Sangyi Khan. The man tolu tutun kaya okuyu tegintim. Namo bud, namo dram, namo sang. By the fortune and merit of my superlative master Li Sun, I, Tulu Tutunkaya, have ventured to recite this Ekatara Agama, then Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sangaya. Here we find, it's not very important, that's not my very point of my talk. Perhaps here Li Sun translates Li Sun. Some colleagues now, some earlier identified it as, Lei Chuan, but I intend to identify it as Li Sun. The superlative master Li Sun mentioned in this colophon might be one such leading monks who prepared these teaching materials and guided Buddhist monks to read Agama texts. If you see that the Persian mentions by the fortune and merit of my superlative master Li Sun, because of him, thanks to him, he had the fortune to read it. And Tutong Kaya mentioned in this text might be one of the monks who was present in Li Sun's lecture. According to other colophons published by the professors Kogi Kudara and Peter Zimmer, later also by Dr. Yukiyu Kasai, many others also read or copied this text. By the way, now this block print was identified as a Khatan print by Professor Nishiwaki Tsuneki. Selection of sentences and passages should have followed the judgment of the compiler based on his understanding of texts and the common ground he shared with the monks who use the readings. He had some considerations about it, and perhaps my students can understand this, and perhaps this might be difficult for them. And this passage they may understand without my guidance, and perhaps the other passages they really need my guidance. And I think the person who compiled this text had such a judging process. That's my assumption. Aside from the instances I have mentioned, in a considerable number of late Old Uyghur texts, we find inserted Chinese characters as integrated part of Old Uyghur sentences. In the Old Uyghur version of the commentary on the Abhidharma Prakarana Shastra, currently kept in the Sweden Hedin collection in Stockholm, all Chinese characters were read in Old Uyghur. This is a very different phenomenon. You see, you also see a lot of Chinese characters in this fragment, but we believe, and actually it was proved by Professor Shogaito and our group, all were actually read in Old Uyghur. I show of our transcription of the first 5 lines. You find a lot of Chinese characters here. For example, in the second line, we have 4. We believe it was read Burkhan. And in second one, 4 and then Le, we believe it was read Burkhan Le. And then we have Ritian, and we believe it was read Burkhan Le, Kun Kanrika, the entire phrase. And then we have here Yu, then we believe it was read Yola Shuruk. This is a very different phenomenon. Another Old Uyghur text discovered in the northern grottos of Dunhuang strongly supports Uyghur reading of Chinese characters. In this fragment, we find the following sentences. First, I show the fragment. It's here, unfortunately. This is from Dunhuang, and it was also published in the volume by Peng Jinzhang. Here you see San and then Bao and so on. It contains some Chinese characters. In the beginning of the second line, you will see find here Xin. Then in the middle, you will find Zhi and so on. It contains several Chinese characters. It was published by me, and we really believe it's a proof these characters really were read in Old Uyghur. Why? Because we have another version of this text in the Berlin-Brandenburg collection, and it was published by Professor Mehmet Ölmez. And in that text, all parts we see in Chinese characters occur in Old Uyghur. For example, we have in this text Sambao. Then in Mehmet Ölmez's text, we have Üç Erdeni. And then we have here Li. And then in the text, we have Küç, and that's power. And in our text, we have Shin. And in the Berlin text, we have Köngül, exactly the heart and Shin. And then we have Zhi in the Dunhuang fragment. But in the Turfan fragment, edited by Mehmet Ölmez, we have Bilik. This is here we can clearly see that these characters exactly were read in Old Uyghur. Surely the reading of the inserted Chinese characters requires very good command of Chinese knowledge and reflect high-level bilingualism. Implementation of such a reading is not possible without a good, very good command of both of Chinese and Old Uyghur. Professor Shogaito again provides has a very extensive discussion of this phenomenon. I again refer to his publication. I have mentioned previously, which is written last year, translated into English by our group, by Noriko Osaki and Sugohara, Fujishiro, and I have done the proofread of the text. Now I move to the second one. Oh, I'm sorry. It took almost 1 hour. I move the second part of my paper. Old Uyghurs' use of the Chinese language. With the utmost probability, both Chinese and Old Uyghur parts of the document, which I have mentioned in the beginning of this talk, were written by the Old Uyghurs. There are more Chinese texts written by Old Uyghurs. 4 Old Uyghur documents containing Chinese parts were included in the Samlung der Uigurische Kontrakte. Amongst them, there is a fragment which was obtained by the Northwest Cultural Relics Investigation Team at Turfan in 1953. Currently, it's kept at the Turfan Xinjiang Museum. The backside of that document has the following Chinese sentence. You see it here. 丁辉去了, we do not know the next, perhaps it's not Liao. And 丁十五两语我文字记, the important is 我文字记. If any Chinese look at it, it's not normal Chinese, and I think it's exactly the Chinese word-for-word translation of the Man Teku Taishi Bitedim found in the preceding Old Uyghur document. That means we have such texts. They look like a Chinese, but actually they strictly follow the syntax of Old Uyghur. Yes, similar Chinese sentences found in the Chinese Buddhist texts written by Old Uyghur Buddhists were discussed by Koichi Kitsudo in 2 papers published in 2011 and 2013. Below, I would like to mention another sentence. It occurs as part of the colophon of the Chenzi Wen, exactly in this fragment. This colophon was first investigated by Thomas Thilo in 1981 in his paper Ein chinesische Turfantext aus der Zeit der Karakterei, in a festschrift published on occasion of the 18th birthday of Annemarie von Gabon. According to the colophon, the text was written by Sheng Quan Du Tong, Xing Sun Du Tong of Yargul in the 13th year of Tianxi. Year Xinwei, which Thomas Thilo considers as the writing mistake of the 34th year of Tianxi, and identifies as 1211, 1211. As continuation of the colophon, we find the following text. No, sorry, what happened here? Oh, sorry. I have a little problem here. Oh, yes. Yes, we have 2 lines Chinese here. 搅和圣泉度通次无头千字文. Exactly this, the second line and the third line. In my talk given at Haneda Memorial Hall of Kyoto University in 1999, I suggested a reconstruction of this sentence in Old Uyghur. Below, I show my somewhat revised version of this reconstruction. I tend to reconstruct it in Uyghur like that, Yargoluk, that's Zhao He and Xingzun Tutung, exactly this one. Then we have Bo, Ci, and Bashis, Wuto, and Ming is Qian, Ujik is Ci, and then Chizir is Twin, and Bashir is Wuto, Yoto, and sorry, Erdenik is Shi, and Jianglai is Kelurip, Boshkuntum is Xuexi, and Jing is Ayayu, then Agzim Ta Ko, Tutup Chi, and Sart Klip Song, and then Ada Tuda Bolmagai, Puhuochu. My tentative translation, we can improve it, and it was done in a hurry some hours ago. I, Xingzun Tutung, brought this headless or stupid 1,000 character essay. The top Javel and learned it, respectfully kept it in my mouth and recited, may nowhere will be in danger. Thomas Tilo connects Yu Wuto with Old Uyghur Pashtus, which has the meanings headless, stupid, and points out that here it may deal with the main text of the Chenzi, which only has 67 lines instead of 250 lines complete text. Professor Nushiwaki, on the other hand, explains Wuto and Yoto in the frame of Tibetan designation of the regular script as Yoto Wenzi and the cursive as Wuto Wenzi. According to him, all Uyghurs had the same concept, and the main text of the Chenzi to which the colophon belongs must have been down considered as cursive by Xingzun Tutung. However, this is less likely. First, thus far, such a designation of script types in Old Uyghur is not known. Secondly, if Xingzun Tutung considers this Chenzi text cursive, then it contradicts with the designation of its as top or important or precious Javel in the next line. My understanding is that here, Başsız min ucuklardan çizgi, headless or stupid 1,000 characters essay, is the modest designation of his own copy of the Chenzi by Xingzun Tutung. Perhaps he thought my calligraphy is not so beautiful and it's not so nice. And that's the common way the Uyghurs and the Asians think about own things. And the phrase Başlık Erdeni, the top or worthy Javel or precious Javel, refers to the Chenzi itself. The real Chenzi text should have been read not only to learn Chinese characters, but also to take protection from danger. Citing the sentence, 若慎州法律松观音一角诉讼都签文萧经仪 the sentence from Yi Jing's text, Professor Nishiwaki points out that all Uyghurs considered the Chenzi as a religious work, just like the Chinese did in the 7th century. To my best knowledge, the Chenzi has 5 different manuscripts in Old Uyghur, one with the original and translation. This is the one, and it was published by Professor Shogaito and me in 2001. And the other one with the old IUPC reading and the translation, all published by Professor Shogaito. And another one offers the text first in a mix of Chinese characters and the IUPC, and then in their Old Uyghur translations. This text was recently published by Professors Omemra and Petatsima. Nevertheless, we know now that the text was frequently used by the Old Uyghurs. In a text written on a board, that's MIC 307, published by my colleague, Dr. Rashman, in 2016, we find notice about this. The beautiful text is kept in the Museum for Asiatische Kunst in Berlin and now is in exhibition at the Humboldt Forum. Old Uyghurs' use of Chinese is a huge topic, enough to fill many books and articles. It already exceeded 1 hour, and I stop here. I thank you very much for your patients. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yakup. I'll stop the recording now.